to call this January 24th East Hampton Board of Education meeting to order. If you please join me for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America, republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We get to agenda item number 3 for liaisons. There is an item that came up after the agenda was posted that I would like the board to consider. So I hereby move that the Board of Education add a new agenda item number 15 for this evening's meeting regarding discussion and possible action regarding an attorney-client privilege communication relating to a personnel complaint made by a former substitute teacher to this evening's agenda, and that this agenda item be taken up before the board's adjournment. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Did Michael Buck is on Zoom? I'd like to know.
Can you respond to that?
What you're
Yes.
voting on? Okay, thank you. Unanimous.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much. All right, moving on to interboard liaisons. I believe we have Alana here. Any update from Board of Finance?
No, nothing going on.
Okay, labor union representatives. I don't see Mr. Shalansky, but I believe he might be watching the live stream. Which leads us to update from principals and director of curriculum. Anybody speaking tonight? There are 2 podiums at the front. Both have speakers. So if you would please come to the podium so that you can be heard via the live stream and Zoom, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Can I put it in here? Or?
No,
Hold it. Got
it
it.
needs to be closer to you than that.
How about now?
That was excellent.
Okay. So, it's hard to believe that today is the 90th day of school, but that means we are exactly halfway through our school year. And that's always a time of reflection for our students and staff, thinking about all that we've already done this year and all we still have to look forward to. But it is the halfway mark. And some students did celebrate today by wearing halftime clothing or halfway clothing, so they were dressed one way on one side of their body and another on the other. But our big event is really the 100th day of school, which currently is scheduled for February 7th, barring any more snow days. And on the 100th day, we will have a building full of 100-day activities. There'll be 100-day collections, there will be hundreds games being played, decorations in increments of 10, and all of those activities will lend themselves to students practicing counting, place value skills. All of our mathematicians will be busy at work on the 100th day of school. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago, the grade 1 team has really stepped up their community service events. Not only have they been sponsoring a 100-day food drive where they've been looking for donations of 100 items of each of the most commonly needed items at the East Hampton Food Bank, but they have also decided to sponsor a Valentine's for Seniors event where they are collecting unused Valentine's Day cards as well as having students make Valentine's Day cards, and they will be donating those Valentines to senior citizens in East Hampton as well as surrounding communities. So they've got their 100-day food drive and their Valentine's for Seniors both going on simultaneously. So they're very busy. And finally, World on February 2nd. RAD is a day aimed at motivating children, teens, and adults worldwide to celebrate the power of words and to create a community of readers. And that is certainly true at Memorial School. So we'll be celebrating in a couple of ways. Mrs. Flannery, our library media specialist, will be hosting a cozy winter lodge on February 2nd and 3rd, where mystery readers will be stopping by to read aloud to our students, and students will have cozy nooks where they can just cuddle up and enjoy a book. We'll also be participating in First Line February, So throughout the month of February, we'll be sharing the first line of a favorite children's book every morning during morning announcements. There'll be student favorites, classics, Cat in the Hat, things like that. And it will encourage students, hopefully, to check that book out of the library and read the rest beyond the first line. So we're very excited about that as well.
Thank you, Joey. Good evening. At Center School, we're nearing the completion of our iReady mid-year diagnostic, and initial data shows promising growth in student performance that is trending in the right direction. The Invention Convention is underway, and the competition remains virtual this year, unfortunately. Our building showcase is at the end of February with the state and regional competition in May. The Grade 5 band concert is this Thursday. We appreciate the partnership with the high school to give our students a professional venue to showcase their talents. And we had successful auditions for our play Aladdin, with close to 100 of our 287 students participating on Tuesday and Wednesday of last week. The director and parent volunteers spoke very highly of how polite and respectful our students were, encouraging their peers as they auditioned. And Student Council is working on a school-wide drive to send Valentine's cards to our troops overseas with student-created drop boxes around our hallways. Thank you.
At the middle school, we've made it to the end of quarter 2 today. Our students are going to be transitioning to a new rotation of specials tomorrow. Teachers will be finalizing grades as we prepare report cards for students. Our PBIS celebration will be held this Friday to congratulate our students who have exemplified our PBIS pillars of respect, compassion, responsibility, and pride. Students will choose from an array of activities like arts and crafts, board games, activities in the gym, music with friends. We also have an electronica musician. Students can meet and see her perform with her drum machine. Our ELA teachers kicked off the start of reading portion of iReady. Students really have been doing such a tremendous job at showcasing what they know. Within our math department, we are finishing up iReady and we'll begin working with the department, which we have begun already, but continue to analyze the assessment to inform instruction. And students are taking algebra, are gearing up to prepare and participate in a midterm, just similar to their high school colleagues. Our winter athletics are wrapping up with about a week and a half left, and we are beginning to prepare for volleyball during February, and our middle school students were thrilled to begin auditions for Greece and partner and collaborate with the high school students. So that was exciting to see today start. Thank you.
Good evening. So as was mentioned before, today is the 90th day of school, and at the high school that means the start of second semester. I know students are happy that mid-year exams have finished. The beginning of second semester gives students an opportunity to switch some electives or semester courses, and the add-drop period will end on Friday for our students. As I mentioned at our last meeting, in the upcoming weeks, we're going to welcome the class of 2026 to East Hampton High School on February 2nd, with the February 3rd. We'll begin our scheduling process where we go to the middle school and inform them of all of our great courses and electives. And I'm really looking forward to personally welcoming the class. For early February, we have our band and our choir concert. And today, our students that are participating in the RAM manufacturing program went over to RAM for their orientation, and we'll be beginning classes in the middle of this week. And we're really excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. As you've heard tonight, the theme is really that we're at that halfway mark, and as many of the buildings highlighted, we are in that mid-year assessment window. Something I wanted to highlight for you is that this year we did launch a new K-12 data dashboard, which allows our teaching teams to really easily manage the data that they collect on students. It allows our administrators to collaborate with teachers, instructional specialists, and related services to ensure that we're providing appropriate instruction and supports to all of our learners. We will continue to grow this data dashboard system. It will allow us to follow that data with students throughout their school career, which is really something in a small district. We know our students so intimately. We spend a good deal of time and energy measuring their performance. We want to make sure that we share that information with their future teachers so that we have a good sense of their growth over time. We'll grow that all the way through the middle and high school, including data that we collect on students through the PSAT process to ensure that our teachers are working with that data and giving our students best possible opportunities moving forward. The midpoint of the school year also means that our staff are engaged in their mid-year meetings as part of their evaluation process. So in the coming weeks, our administrators will be meeting with all of our teachers and certified staff to talk about their goals from the fall that they set related to both student performance and classroom practice. And finally, our district's Professional Development and Evaluation Committee, or PDEC, will meet this Thursday. That committee oversees our evaluation process for our certified staff, as well as our professional learning calendar. And they'll be meeting with representation from all of our buildings, and we'll be talking a lot about those mid-year meetings and how those are going across the district, as well as planning our upcoming professional learning in February and March. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Mr. Mosher with us tonight?
Mr. Mosier's father passed away. He will
Oh,
not be
so
here.
sorry. And Mrs. Seta, I think we'll be hearing from you a little bit later. Thank you so much. Okay, audience of citizens, I just want to remind everybody that there will be an opportunity for audience of citizens during the budget workshop portion of tonight's meeting. But if we do have any audience of citizens in the room that would like to come up, please stand at one of the podiums to speak and state your name and address for the record. Do you have anyone on Zoom that would like to speak? Oh, I'm sorry, we do have one more in the room.
All right, I'm Amanda Amtmanis, 40 Old Milltown Road in Cobalt, and I just wanted to call some attention, put some highlight on a couple of stats to keep in mind as you're getting into budget time and all that, is we typically in our town have, our data has been that student achievement's been quite high compared to other districts, and per pupil expenditures have been quite low. So when we look at surrounding towns, we're getting more and we're paying less. And we've gotten to this point over time in a large part because we have very talented administration that makes very carefully thought out decisions, and because they've been able to cultivate relationships with the board. And it hasn't been a partisan thing, because really it's not a party thing, it's the sides here are people who want, you know, a good education for students and people that don't want to pay a lot in taxes. And given that we have one of the lowest per pupil expenditures in the area, both sides are being fairly well served. So I would urge kind of a steady as she goes as opposed to big changes to keep that. Because if you start making big changes to direction, we're gonna end up paying more, quite possibly, and getting less. And you know, the goodwill that we've been able to enjoy has been a cost-saving measure as well. So I'm just hoping as you go forth, you know, I'm not here to speak to any particular thing in the budget, but just to urge keeping that in mind, and that this really hasn't been a political thing. We have very talented administration here who know what they're doing. They make decisions very carefully based on best practices. So whatever the issue is, we're in good hands. So I'm just hoping that we keep that in mind as we move forward. That was all.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room for audience of citizens? Hi, do we have anybody on Zoom that would like to speak? Please state your name and address for the record.
I don't see any hands up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, consent agenda. Do I have a motion that the East Hampton Board of Education adopt the consent agenda from January 10th?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much. Student Board of Education representatives.
Good evening, everybody. So last week, the high school wrapped its midterm exams, and during that time, the National Honor Society hosted tutoring sessions for any student that wanted to come to the library for an hour after their exam period to work on any classes that they may need help with before they took their exam. Last Friday marked the beginning of the third marking period in second semester. It's crazy, I'm already in the last semester of my senior year. And then the Business Club is making Valentine's Day candy bags for the Senior Center. For our athletic updates, this past weekend, the cheerleading team had their cheer exhibition. Boys basketball currently has a record of 5 wins and 4 losses, and they play again tomorrow against Old Saybrook. Girls basketball currently has a record of 10 wins and 1 loss, and they play at home tomorrow against Old Saybrook as well. And then for indoor track, on Saturday, Kaylee Gravel, Jessica Starr, and Briley Montanari traveled to the Armory in New York City to compete against some of the top athletes in the region in preparation for their Shoreline Championship and State Championship meets.
Thank you. Okay, personnel, no updates for personnel. We do have 2 meetings, one in February and March, one in March for interventionists. Policy and curriculum.
We don't have anything on the agenda tonight, but we did meet prior to this meeting, and I have something on it.
Thank you. Finance, transportation, building and grounds.
No report.
Thank you. Okay, communications, superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. You'll note the rest of the agenda is very light. We're taking the time tonight to keep updating you on budget and allow you to ask questions. Traditionally, in your workshop, you have allowed questions from the audience, which we welcome as well. 2 weeks ago, we went through the superintendent's description of the budget, and we will be glad to answer any questions you have on that. I'm going to ask some of the principals to speak as to some of the programs that are listed in here and give you a chance to ask questions as well. Then we're going to introduce you to Karen's budget book, hot off the press, and I'm going to walk you through just a few sections of that. And you're meeting 3 weeks from tonight on the 14th. We will spend the entire meeting going through this. So you'll have, even though we're going to walk through it very quickly tonight, you'll have a meeting dedicated to it, and then on the 28th, you can finish up any questions you have on that before you vote. But please don't feel like we're going to rush through the line by line tonight. Just want a couple of call-outs tonight, knowing that we'll give you 3 weeks because the way January falls is an extra Monday, so you have an extra week to look through this and develop any questions. So what I'd like to do tonight is just call your attention to just a few things. For those of you that haven't looked through our book yet, we've prioritized this year into what we're calling academic essentials, mental health essentials, and then some tremendous progress that we expect to make in math in particular, and STEM overall. One of the things I wanted to call your attention to, and Amanda just brought this up, is our per pupil expenditure. And there's some detail on this in the thinner book on page 32. You'll see that over the last 3-4 years, we've ranked in the area of 15, 16, 17 out of these towns that not only do we compare ourselves as far as what we spend on education, these are the schools that we compare ourselves to academically as well. And they are different sized schools, but all of them are similar to us once again, in that they have their own high school and they're not part of a regional school district. This was last year's per pupil expenditure, so we can see that we were down a step. And I called your attention to this page at the bottom of page 33. And in early versions of the book, and I think everybody in here has one because I was not going to make Shelley reprint it, it says the percentage of growth in ECS, and that really should be the percentage of growth in PPE, which is the per pupil expenditure. So in the printed version, in early versions, I do have this printed wrong. This is the percentage of growth in per pupil expenditure. And I explained last week, or 2 weeks ago, that it was higher than traditional because what the state did in the per pupil expenditure, they included all funds that were given to the town for reopening of schools. And I actually made an error in talking with you last time. I told you that the $450,000 that we were given was reimbursed to us by the town. It was actually reimbursed to the town by the state of Connecticut. So in other words, when we opened, not this past fall of 21, but the fall of 20, with all the things that we did to prepare for students coming back, we made sure there were air conditioning units in every single classroom. We made sure that HVAC systems were up to par. We purchased gloves, we purchased all sorts of desk shields and things like that. All of that was reimbursed to the town. But that money got added to everybody's per pupil expenditure, and that's why it looks like across the state, there's a high level of growth in per pupil expenditure from one year to the next. So I just want to make sure that you understand when I said the school was reimbursed from the town, the school is reimbursed from the state and not from the town. So per pupil expenditure impacted by funding from the state, like I told you. So when you look at page 32 versus 33, we typically don't see in 1 year that amount of growth in per pupil expenditure. The other thing that I wanted to share with you, because a few of you asked me questions afterwards, was about the minimum budget requirement. So I want to assure you that when grants are no longer available or adjusted, our MBR is not impacted. So when we spend the $600,000 that we were given by the American Rescue Plan, when that goes away, the town does not have to sustain that level of funding for the school. So that is not going to affect your minimum budget requirement. So when people ask us what our minimum budget requirement is, it's a number figured out by the state. If you look at number 2, the 2021-22 budgeted appropriation, including supplemental appropriations, was $33,085,395. You'll see that it matches in my book and Karen's book on page 6. That's the figure we're using for the 21-22 education budget, $33,085,395. So what the state says is this town cannot spend any less than that. That's what the minimum budget requirement means. So moving into next year, town cannot spend less than $33,085,395. Now people always say, gee, I know things are tight, maybe we should have a 0% increase. A 0% increase to the school means that you've got to cut things. When we flip the book and when we pay people contractual raises, when we pay health insurance increases, gas increases, electricity increases, etc., it's never going to be an even zero. So I know people always say, it would be nice to have a 0% increase. A 0% increase for the town or for the schools requires a tremendous amount of cutting. So I just want people to understand that. When I presented the budget to you 2 weeks ago, though, I did explain that we are not adding any certified personnel that are not grant funded. So we're trying to present the most reasonable budget without adding people. And that was also a question that a few of you asked me afterwards about our staffing, in that if we add people, which we have with the American Rescue Plan funds, we've added 2 positions. When that money runs out at the end of the 23-24 school year, there was a notion that we were obliged to keep those positions on, and that is not the case. If that funding runs out and we decided that we cannot afford to keep them, then we have no obligation to keep those positions. Now, those people due to seniority, may be able to bump other people if they are certified, but we are not required to keep those positions. And I urge you to look in your book at pages 25 and 26, where I've just kind of highlighted the staffing to show you that we're just not carrying positions through that we don't need. When you look at our elementary school of almost 500 students, there's one art teacher, one music teacher, half a librarian. We're not flooded with extra teachers. Even our classroom sizes that we anticipate for next year, if you look at the kindergarten, we're anticipating for next year 119. That would be 6 teachers. Grade 2, grade 3, roughly we're talking about 20 students per class. It's not like I have extra teachers that we can't figure out what to do with. Same at the high school. For those of you that have been on the board for a little while, you've heard us talk about if we had an extra business teacher or family consumer science teacher, we could fill that teacher's schedule very easily. Just in the case of family and consumer science, 200 students do not get to take courses in that area that they would like to, because we just have one teacher who's only able to handle about 150 kids per semester. So I just wanted to bring you up to speed on that. So we're going to go through, I'm going to ask the principals to come up. They know what order they're supposed to be in, and we're just going to answer just a few questions in each of these areas. So, starting with our elementary, and if you have questions along the way, please ask. I want to make sure that people understand that the funding for everything we're going to show you on the next couple of pages, and this is on page 10 in your book, all of these programs are coming from a budget source that we are level funding. So when we call it our curricular and instruction line, it's about $81,500. We are putting that exact amount of money into the budget for next year. We're not asking for additional funding. We are swapping out some of the programming that we did from last year. So if you have any questions about foundation, spelling connections, patterns of power, or SPIRE, Joey and Mary and Chris are prepared to answer. If not, they're going to give you the 30-second version of each.
Any questions to start?
Mr. Smith, I do have a question about MBR. Does that number include grant funding?
It depends on the nature of the grant. It will not include things like the American Rescue Plan, etc. Anything that is in the budget, in Karen's budget book, that is part of our regular funding.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So most would agree that literacy opens the door for all types of learning, and it begins with early literacy for our youngest learners. Foundations is a program that uses a systematic, explicit phonics approach, emphasizing foundational skills, including reading, spelling, and handwriting, and it is our Tier 1 phonics program for all of our K-3 students. Questions?
Chris?
Spelling Connections at Center School. We are using an earlier edition of the program. This program provides a structured process for teaching spelling patterns. Each week, students embark on a word study journey with a chance to show what they know and grow from there. Individual assessments gauge familiarity with a particular word pattern and measure existing knowledge. Rather than get slotted into a particular level or static track, Spelling Connections meets students where they are and provides multiple opportunities to move forward.
Question?
What were they doing before that?
It's the Foundations program. Prior to Spelling Connections,
Yeah.
it's Foundations in grades K through 3.
Okay.
And they transitioned to Spelling Connections in grade 4.
Question, students with dyslexia, does that fall into this category?
So students that may have an exceptionality and have something such as dyslexia, they follow within their IEP a specialized program that would work with those phonemic awareness skills, and it's something at our level that we call the Wilson program. So it is a step-by-step, as well as Wharton Gillingham, that all of our special education teachers are trained in. So that's, again, a systematic approach for students that may have those challenges.
Is that somewhere else in this budget?
That's ingrained in our current practices.
The resources to support those have already been purchased, so they're not new requests this year.
Okay, these are all new requests.
Foundations and Spelling Connections specifically are programs we've been using, but they have consumable components for students, and so we need to replenish those. Patterns of Power, Inspire, Reading Intervention, which I'll speak to, are new programs. Patterns of Power, we continue to always audit our practices and look at our K, language arts instruction in particular, requires a lot of constant analysis and response to legislation. And so one of the areas that we've worked on a lot in the last few years, you hear embedded in Foundations and Spelling Connections, which is really foundational instruction around spelling and vocabulary, which was a huge need for us as a district, and we've met that. But now we're really looking at grammar and punctuation and mechanics with our students, and so Patterns of Power is a K-8 resource that gives us a scope and sequence to really focus on a systematic approach to introducing various aspects of punctuation, mechanics, and grammar to ensure that our students have guaranteed experiences with those skills and that we know that they're building on them in a sequence progression.
How do we know it works?
Patterns of Power is one that we've researched and looked at how districts have seen that program impact in the field. So it's one that is recommended for this purpose.
Right, recommended by educators or who
Yes.
who did it?
Yes, we did our own audit of various programs for this purpose, and we looked at what was very cost effective and what we felt would be able to be implemented within our literacy workshop system that we already have, so that our teachers could have a consistent format to introduce these skills. They do have training on introducing these skills. This is really looking more at the scope and sequence for when they're introducing them and giving them shared lesson plans to work from.
What did they use before this?
Our grammar practices previously have been homegrown, so we wanted to make sure that we had a consistent approach for all teachers.
And was it?
We felt that it was an area for improvement. It's one that we've identified that we'd like to increase our proficiency with. Spire Reading Intervention is the other program I'll speak to. This is a research proven program. It's highly recommended in the area of literacy intervention. So we monitor all of our students and their reading performance and any students who have identified gaps. The first step that we do is provide them additional reading services. We refer to those as Tier 2 or Tier 3 services. This is required by state law. We have been auditing our current tool that we use, which is LLI, or Leveled Literacy Intervention. It does not meet the recommendations for recent state legislation. The right to read legislation that was recently passed does require us to use certain recommended programs, and this is one of them that we feel would be a best fit for our district.
So at the high school, we are asking for an update for our advanced placement U.S. government textbooks. The most recent purchase was from 2011. 3 years ago, in 2019, the College Board revamped its curriculum. So these new textbooks would be 100% aligned with that. It would meet the needs of our students in those courses. And our goal at the high school is to try and get more and more students to take these higher level courses. So we feel like this is an important request to allow our students to continue to be successful on the AP exam. And then the English department is requesting replacement text for many of our courses, specifically our UConn ECE course, which is a college level course as well. And again, it meets the curriculum that we're given by the University of Connecticut for that course.
And I think at your November meeting, you heard an impassioned plea from the English department at the high school on this particular item. And these two small cost items, I explained to you, and in fact, I just reaffirmed with you, due to the number of students interested in family and consumer sciences, that we can't get into the courses, we can at least provide some sort of club stipend activity for them to be part of programming after school. And then I think you heard from the music parents at your November meeting that we should continue to fund the piano accompanist for choir concerts. This was something that was cut out 3 years ago. Yeah.
With regard to the club stipends for the Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America, it's a very small number. What does that allow to be done? Like, what level of involvement or how often? I know.
Yeah, no.
Planned yet, but
you know, it's not a very generous stipend for what probably will be once a week meetings or something like that after school. And you know, our stipends are not a lot. They range, except for the athletes, the athletic stipends for our coaches. They're involved every day after school and weekends and nights and things like that. Even those are in the $2,000 to $4,000 range. So our club stipends range anywhere from, you know, $300 to $1,200, depending on how many times they meet. And we do allow people, if they say, you know what, instead of meeting one time a week, I'd like to meet every day or twice a week or just a portion of a season, you know, we will consider adjusting them as well. But not once the budget is set. So this would be the amount.
Yeah, I mean,
And,
that's
you know, to be
valuable.
honest, a lot of our clubs and activities happen by just the goodwill of some of the teachers after school. We finally added a stipend, like I said, for mountain biking and the middle school interact club, each with over 100 kids involved. And for the first 2 years, they got no stipend at all for running those.
Does that club accommodate all of the kids that couldn't get into the class?
You know, it could. The room is only so big. A lot of the students who are taking the class will want to be in the club, but it would not preclude, if you're not taking the class, you would not be prohibited from being in some of the club activities.
Thank you.
And then just now moving on to our second aspect, the mental health essentials. Rod is not here tonight. Unfortunately, his father passed away. He's in Michigan. And I think we did a good job talking about these 2 weeks ago. I'd like you to hear from Rod, so we'll just push that off until the February 14th meeting. But Rod was, just as a reminder, Rod was able to secure additional American Rescue Plan funds, or the ESSER funds, for each of these positions, separate from the $600,000 that we got for our math specialists. This is additional money on top of that, and it will cover an additional school psychologist, a consulting psychiatrist, and direct services, after-school tutoring for some of our children with dyslexia. And then I think Joey can speak to this. This is also coming out of that same fund. Joey?
Sure. So in order to open doors for all learners, it's important that we really consider their emotional and behavioral needs as well. A sensory support space would be intended for students who are having difficulty regulating their emotions and their behaviors. It's a place that would be appropriately outfitted and staffed to provide tiered strategy instruction. So just as we provide tiered instruction for our students in the areas of literacy and numeracy, we really are needing to provide tiered instruction for students who are struggling to regulate their behavior and their emotions as well. A sensory support space would be a calming space to reset, to access sensory support tools. It would allow for students to learn to proactively regulate their emotions and behaviors more safely and consistently in a space that is specifically designed to meet their needs.
Thank you, Joey. Let's move on to just briefly the math and STEM programming. And if I could call your attention to page 17. I know I spent a little bit of time on this 2 weeks ago, but because Alana was here, I really wanted to take a moment to talk about this because I know how excited she was in us moving in a manufacturing direction. And she'll recall me showing that picture of that on page 17, that little orange Lego that was the only item we had in high school robotics. And now 2 years later, you look at what we have for robotics and pre-engineering, pre-manufacturing. You see a room with the appropriate equipment. You see those blue things with the angular contraption on 3D printers. You see a robotics level action table that you would expect to see in high school competition robotics, and of course, the classes that we offer. We've completely changed, if you look at the bottom of page 17, the courses that we offer in our technology department, and we're excited that we are in the, we'll be in the third year, this spring, of the Youth Manufacturing Pipeline Initiative. And then we're just as proud on page 18 of our students in the middle school and center school who are very involved in STEM activities. And something we're going to talk about now is our middle school. Yes?
I have a quick question. I want to go back to mental health.
Oh, sure.
And staffing.
Yeah.
And the various programs here with budgets. And all of these have a cost of zero because you've already got grant funding. Was there a limit on that grant funding?
Yes, we used everything we got.
Okay, we couldn't ask for more?
I think Rod yes, they gave us an amount, and Rod had to propose what we would be doing with it.
Okay, is there an opportunity to request, maybe get more money for mental health?
No. No, so similar to the American Rescue Plan, our town was given about $600,000, and it was left up to us to decide what to do with. And we had to have that approved by the state. Same with Rod. Rod was given a pile of money to decide what to do with, and we chose these, and that has been approved by the state as well.
Okay, thank you.
I have a robotics question.
Yes.
I don't know if that fits here, but I just wondered, how common is it for high schools in our area to not only have a dedicated robotics club, but to compete? I've heard of a lot of robotics competitions, just in general. I couldn't tell you which schools, but is that something that is really mainstream now, that schools really
Sure.
should be
So
offering? And
if you look at, go back to page 17, and look at the very top, that's where we were 2 years ago.
I know.
Now, look at the bottom half,
Yeah.
that's where we are now. In 2 years,
Yeah.
we should be talking about a robotics team going to the state competition and national competitions. We do not have an active robotics team at the high school. What they're doing in the class is geared for that, but for competitive robotics, it's as serious as winter basketball would be. It's, those kids are at the school 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week, 5 nights a week, competing on weekends against other towns, going to state, national competitions. That's where I would like to see us go. And we're moving in that direction. So even though I'm excited about where we are not leading the pack by any means in this. We will be leading the pack, but it's still a couple more years growth.
Taking steps. Okay, I kind of had a feeling that was something that was fairly mainstream at this point, and I was curious about it because I certainly hope that we can start to work towards something.
Well, what we're trying to do is, if you look at this next slide, and this is on page 20 in your books, and Christina will talk briefly about this, we're trying to create, the opportunity to grow this at the middle school. In other words, a math counts, a competition. We don't have a competitive math team at the high school. We'd like to start one at the middle school and bring it up to the high school. Same with robotics at the middle school. So I don't want to steal Christine's thunder. I hope that I've left her something to say at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think when I think about a middle schooler, not only is my priority in what they are doing during the academic day, but I want to expand those experiences before and after school. And I really take great pride in what we've been able to offer our students this year, especially following a year like last year where a lot of those opportunities we had to hold because of COVID. So like student council, Panther Chefs, World Language Club, athletics, homework club, we're looking to provide an array of opportunities for students so we can spark and engage their interests and passions. So math counts. Right now frequently happens every other week. It's a national middle school mathematics competition. Students practice, perform a variety of math problems. We have about a total of 23 students. 12 will be competing in the regional competition, and that will happen in February. So as that comes, I'll share more information on that. And then Robotics Club. So we have up to 10 students at each meeting, and it continues to grow. Students work with Lego robotics, how to code for moving robotic entities, and a spherical I/O robot where they code the way it moves as well as determining how it can maneuver around and through obstacles. So like Paul had mentioned, a lot of teachers are volunteering their time for these experiences for our students. So these stipends allow for the longevity of these programs for us.
Okay, Mary's going to talk.
I'm going to speak to the classroom science kits, K-5, across Memorial and Center School. We continue to align our science curriculum with the next generation science standards, which are adopted by the Connecticut State Board of Education. These units of study that we have partnered with CREC, they have a curriculum consortium called Catalyst that we're a part of. And these units of study are engaging for our students, they are hands-on, they are inquiry-based, so that they can truly engage in science experiments starting at the elementary level. The science materials for that do, again, require student consumables. So whether it's butterflies or various kinds of things that need to be replaced each year, this again is cutting across our entire K-5 environment. These kits are really designed to allow our teachers, we have 6 sections on almost every grade level, 7 in some cases, to have the materials that they need in order to complete those units of study in that hands-on in manner that really next gen requires of science instruction.
So at Center School, we do want to lead the pack for elementary coding and robotics. This will really open the door for students to experience these coding and robotics skills that will, in turn, hopefully, have that interest at middle school and high school and beyond. So the Raspberry Pi is a credit card-sized computer that's designed to teach students how to program. The computer runs an open source operating system, meaning it's completely customizable, and the tool can adapt to the skill level of the user. With a large online community, projects, tutorials, and a step-by-step process for creating a coding project using this tool are all available free online. Our students in the STEM lab continue to exhibit complex problem-solving skills and are looking for more.
Thank you, Chris. If you look at the bottom of page 18 in your booklet, you'll see that in just a short time, in 1 year, we've shifted technology classes at the middle school to STEM and pre-manufacturing. And I know you met the teacher, Chris Briggs, at your November meeting. We asked Chris to just come back. While we did not approve everything that Chris was asking for, we decided that we're going to use Title IV grant dollars to really push the middle school technology program ahead. So Chris, I don't know if you have any comments to make. Christina?
You took some of my thunder away with some of my words,
sorry
but
about
that's
that.
okay, no problem. In a short amount of time, thanks to Chris Briggs joining us, we've really changed what technology education looks like at the middle school and continue to evolve our curriculum. We have morphed into a course that allows for student inquiry, creativity, and hands-on collaboration through the lens of engineering and architecture. The experiences our students have had this year in technology education has not only provided a stepping stone to the opportunities our students will have in courses at the high school, but opens the door to future career paths based on their passions and interests that can be sparked by their experiences with us. The first 2 boxes shown speak to the consumables needed each year, like rocket kits to support 6th grade's focus on aviation and rocketry, to various wood supply where our 7th graders learn of structural engineering and designing of bridges. Also within the requests are the software and classroom technology to support the curriculum. With 8th grade focusing on an introduction to architecture and designing homes, parks, and community spaces, Chief Architect would allow students to create layouts just as one would in a real-world setting. Vectric Aspire is an intuitive software solution for creating and cutting parts on a CNC router. So for example, students can create a design and produce a replica of it within a wood or a plaque. The 3D printer would be utilized across all grade levels. 6th grade designing airfoils or wings to determine air flowing over them. 7th grade designing their own towers and bridges to determine and test structure. 8th graders designing and printing a 3D model of a home. The printer can also be extended to our Robotics Club I had just spoken about, where they can design a robot or a piece of one.
If you have any questions, and I know Chris is never shy about answering any questions. Now, go ahead.
Same question with mental health. You have a grant here, looks like Title IV. Are you sure you've gotten all you could get from the state?
Yes, Title IV also gives us a dollar amount, and then Mary lets the state know how we're using it. It's had to be used for certain things, so there's an audit on how that's expended.
We couldn't go back to the state and request additional funds under a special needs request. So I just want to make sure we're getting everything we possibly can from the state. If they're giving grants out, we should get, I would hope, more than our fair share.
I would agree. But the title grants are a set formula, and they are established by the state and the federal government based on a number of criteria, so they are not negotiable.
Kristen, do you have any comments that you'd like to make?
I don't. Christina and I, Ms. Emerald and I spoke at length about the budgetary requests, and so she put an excellent presentation together. I'm just here in case anyone has any specific questions, because I know this is a larger section of the request for the STEM programming for next year. So if the board had anything specific that they were interested in or wanted to know, I'm more than happy to answer anything.
It even takes 2 pages. I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to say about the other items.
Just the digital arts color printer really is to support our art teacher, Mr. Pastor. For the art classes in our enrichment, students create tremendous works of art, not just with paper, but digitally through graphic design. So the request of this printer would allow students to print, present, showcase their work to their peers and throughout the building.
And then Mr. Werner, the high school textbooks, the statistics text, our second purchase of text this year.
Some of these statistic textbooks, as I looked through them earlier, I believe some of the people in this room may have used them when they went to East Hampton High School. So I think it's pretty fair to say that it is time to replace them, but it's not about the age. That's one part of it. I think back to when I was in high school, and if I had the opportunity to learn statistics through analytics and sports, I probably would have been a much more successful math student than I was. So I feel like just how statistics have evolved in the way they're taught and engage students in more real-world things that we're doing now. It just really makes sense for us to replace the age and the content as well.
And to anybody in the community, we have a copy of the AP government book and the statistics textbook. It's in the central office. People can come and view it. We'll set you up in a room in the town hall. If you'd like to take a peek at either of those books, we're going to keep them until May. Since Rich Fielding was doing our video tonight of the live stream, I thought I would bring him in to answer any questions that you had about Chromebooks. The Capital Committee had a lot of questions about some of the technology that we were purchasing through Capital. The Chromebooks this year we are going to feel as an addition to our budget for the first time.
So I think the slide you see there kind of says it all. This continues a program of replacing 1/4 of our Chromebooks each year, so we have a 4-year rotation. We give Chromebooks to 1st, 5th, and 9th graders. They keep that same Chromebook for 4 years. And after 4 years, the Chromebook has pretty much reached the end of its useful life. Some of them that still can get software updates will use to supplement kindergarten carts or use as replacement devices if somebody's Chromebook completely fails. But really, we only get another 6 months to a year out of a device after it's gone through its useful life.
Just a question. What year did you get rid of cows?
Actually, we only just got rid of cows when we had to switch to one-to-one remote learning. We had one-to-one at the upper levels, but we still had cows in place at the elementary schools. So we had to make a mad dash and pull all of the Chromebooks off of carts to reassign them to students and then supplement them with as many devices as we could get as quickly as we could. We were able to take advantage of some deals that came through in order to get them as quickly as possible. So it was only when we switched to remote learning that we actually got rid of cows. And then we still do use cows, computers on wheels, for those wondering. At the kindergarten level, the Chromebooks are still cart-based. At the kindergarten level, they're not assigned specifically to students, so because those students don't take them home, so we leave them in carts so that they can stay charged throughout the day.
So when they reach grade 1, they keep it for 4 years, correct?
That's correct.
And so on and so on after that. Before then, they have it on cows, kindergarten and younger?
Yeah, there are devices available in pre-K as well. There are very, very few in pre-K that are used.
And then I told you last time, one of our other large purchases this year will be a K-5 math series. For those of you tuning in for the first time, We used Go Math for 5 years. 5 years ago, we paid $250,000. We made a one-time purchase and didn't have to worry about math curriculum, math textbooks for grades K through 5 until this year, when Go Math is sunsetted and no longer available. We're looking to purchase a new math program. It may be the continuation of Go Math, which is Into Math, or these 3 programs. And I told you we would do a big spring presentation to you when the committee has chosen which math series they will use. But I thought Mary could just give you an update on how we're looking at each one.
So as Mr. Smith said, the last time the district took a close look at math programming was in 2015-2016 when it made its commitment to Go Math. With the publisher sunsetting that product, we're really taking this as an opportunity. Any change to K-5 math curriculum can be a challenge, but we're really seeing it as an opportunity to reflect on our practices. We've been doing that work all along, so this is a great chance for us to find a program that actually matches our approach to math instruction a little bit more closely. We have a committee of K-5 teachers and our math specialist team who are actively reviewing and piloting materials. All of the pilot materials that we've obtained, and we have them from all the programs you see listed here, San Francisco Math, Illustrative Mathematics, Bridges in Mathematics, and Into Math, have been given to the district at no charge to the district. So we have access to all 4 programs. We have teachers who are actively reviewing those programs. We have pilots of the materials happening in classrooms so the teachers can see how they feel with their students. They can review the assessment practices, the parent and home-based resources that support the program. Something we look at very closely now is what's the digital package that supports that instruction, should students ever need to access their learning from home. So they're really doing a very thorough process and rigorous review of those tools. Our math specialists are creating a program review guide that really looks at specific facets of each program and how that plays out, whether you're looking at San Francisco Math, Illustrative Mathematics, Bridges, or Into Math. That is an ongoing and collaborative process. It's really important that the teachers are closely involved in that decision-making. So we've included in our pilot process visits to other districts. So we've been able to go out and see districts neighboring us or in the field. We've spoken with State Department of Ed representatives about what does the data show about the most effective programs, and we're visiting districts that have had great success. So we'll continue that work. It's an ongoing process throughout the school year.
Have you talked to the 8-year-olds?
Yes, our students give us feedback all the time, and that's very specifically why we're piloting the materials in the classrooms so that we can see how the students respond.
So compare, contrast each program.
The students will have exposure to multiple programs through the pilot process, yes.
So it's user-friendly?
Yes, I think each of the programs is different in their pros and cons, and so ultimately we'll weigh which are most meaningful we feel to the outcomes for the students and to supporting classroom instruction. We have data analysis on the effectiveness of the programs, we have testimonials from other districts that are using them, and then we're cultivating those kinds of testimonials right here in East Hampton so that our students and our teachers are speaking to the experience.
Without getting too much in the weeds, could you explain a little bit about why we need these programs? Is it because it works with Chromebooks? Is it because it's directed by the state that we have to follow these programs for some reason? I'm just wondering whatever happened to writing up your multiplication tables for the teacher. And math is basically straightforward to a certain level. And I was just wondering why we have to follow these quote-unquote programs, why we need instruction.
Absolutely. The State Department of Education adopted the Connecticut Core Standards for Mathematics back in 2012. So all of our instruction has to align to those standards. And then these materials, as was the case when we went to school in East Hampton, there would have been a math textbook. This is the equivalent of that, where there's a teacher's manual and student resources. The teachers do a tremendous amount of work outside of those programs to look at how they can personalize that to their classroom and their specific group of students, the 23 learners in front of them, how are they going to make sure that they access that? But it is common practice in the field that a district would have a math program in order to have a reliable and viable math instructional practice where we can guarantee experiences. and that teachers can work collaboratively in teams with a common curriculum and common assessments to ensure outcomes for students.
Okay, and are you looking at these with the, it was mentioned in earlier meetings that we're behind because of COVID in math, and so we're looking at these with the hope of back to where we were prior to COVID, if not greater.
Yeah, I think what we anticipated and saw was that mathematics instruction in particular was something we knew students would, particularly our youngest students, explicit instruction is really important. And they were impacted in their access to that through the pandemic. Our internal progress monitoring actually shows that our students continue to make good gains. So we are looking at how these programs are the best in the field. These are the programs that our colleagues, whether they're in Glastonbury or South Windsor, some of the highest performing districts in our region, are using. So we're actively researching what's going to have the greatest impact, yes, for our students.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Once something is chosen, it will be, after we approve this budget, right, in the spring. And once it's chosen, I imagine, it would be a commitment. You make the decision and commit a multi-year commitment to use that. I guess with that in mind, I know Mr. Smith had talked about the reason why the 1 year cost is included, the $76,000 in this proposed budget, but so I wonder, is the intent, or can you explain again, maybe Mr. Smith, if you've already done, so why we have the 1 year cost in there, and does that mean that at next year's budget time, we would anticipate that we would then have a multi-year price?
So at this point, we've only put a $76,000 placeholder in the budget.
Yeah.
If we found as time went on that, something changes, we have more retirements than we anticipate, and once Mary gets an official price of a 3-year, I think we've talked about not going beyond 3 years at this point, but we will present each of these to you, our top choice, and what it would cost for 1 year versus 3 years, and then we would make the decision at the time. I think it will be a stretch, given where we are with the budget right now, to consider 3 years. But there's also a nice cost savings if you don't mind putting the money up front and getting that done. Those textbook companies love that type of commitment.
Okay, thank you.
And in your book on page 24, if you do want to poke around, there are live links in the PDF that I've sent out for each of these, and you can get some good information on each of them. Sal, as a math person, I would expect you to dive right in on those.
Thank you.
We spent a little bit of time on these slides, the special education cost savings that we realized because we've made the commitment to do a lot of programming in-house. And I know that Rod deserves the credit for this, so I think we can push this off to the February 14th meeting. But the charts are pretty clear on the tremendous savings we realize by doing these programs in-house. I mean, even if you just look at this year's, on page 29, what would cost us to outplace $6,700,000 versus in-school programming for the same kids of $3,200,000. So I wanted to take just a few moments to walk you through just some highlights in Karen's budget book. For those of you on the Zoom meeting, there was a link to this in this week's update. If you have your email open, you can go to my morning update and get a live link to this book. For people in the audience, there are copies of the book up here. I just want to walk you through a few pages, and then you're going to dig deep into this, I hope, on February 14th. But if you start on page 2, look at that box in the middle, the narrow box in the middle. You can see that salaries and benefits equal about 84% of our operating budget. That's been pretty consistent, and that is not unique in schools. We pay people to do the work. The teacher is the most valuable asset to us, and so you can see that we are a people industry in teaching. You'll also notice the bottom box, the local taxpayers share. You can see that is starting to go up. as the state's commitment to the education cost share grant continues to go down. If you look on page 3, and I'm just rushing through this, make notes, and Karen and I will be glad to answer any questions you have. She's done a great job at showing you a history of federal and state grants on that top box. And then down at the bottom, I love how she puts the sale of our services to neighboring communities because of the programs that Rod is committed to. Not only do they benefit our children, we are able to get the maximum capacity of students involved. So we do give open seats to other districts, and then we realize additional cost savings to run those programs. But that is up to what we anticipate next year, over $400,000 in tuition. If you look at the bottom of page 4, that very bottom paragraph. So when you look through the budget, you're going to see some inconsistencies, but understand that this year's budget and next year's budget compared to previous budgets assume that we are running all programs and activities. We curtailed a lot of the after-school activities over the last 2 years, and now this year and next year, all of those are back. Athletics are back in full, etc. Also, to be competitive with substitutes, we increased the substitute rate in November 2020 because we were not competitive with towns around us. We are still not the highest, but we are not the lowest, and we're having much more success filling our subs, where some districts are panicking and principals are covering classes, and where they're doing all sorts of creative things, including closing for a day. That has not really been an issue for us. If you look at page 5, and you look at the classified salaries growth, it's the second box. What you'll note is that due to COVID, during COVID and last year, we could not fill several of these positions. We're having luck filling them now, but these are positions that, based on children's IEPs, we are required to fill and have. When the school was in hybrid and students were coming every other day, it was a little bit easier to get away with staff shortages, and now we're not. So you see the increase in that. Karen can give you some details. And then if you look down on page 6, you'll see a drop in transportation. That is because we've reduced a bus, and we have also negotiated a 1-year extension in the bus contract. So the large capacity buses, we have a 1-year agreement of 4.85% increase, and then the small special ed vans, a 6% increase. That will go out to bid next fall. The magnet school tuition at the very bottom, we're excited that our students are staying in district, and we're seeing less students choose magnet schools. Not that there's anything wrong with magnet schools, but I want every family to feel like they can find everything that they need in the East Hampton schools. If you jump to page 10, 9 and 10, on page 9, Karen has done a great breakdown of the certified budget and what the teacher increases are. Please note that you, as a Board of Education, in your last 2 negotiations with teachers, you've been able to add 2 steps at the bottom. So what was a 10-step scale is now a 12-step scale, which means it takes longer for teachers to get to the highest pay grade on the salary schedule. And that's been a nice concession by the teachers and a nice move on your part as negotiators. And if you look at the bottom of page 10, you can see that staffing has been pretty consistent for the last 3 years. I'm going to have you jump now to the page 13. 13 is a list of all of our bargaining units and when their contract period is and what their increases are. And then starting on page 14, you can go through page by page and see all the certified salaries. Jump to page 28, and Karen has begun all the classified salaries. Any questions you have, we'll be prepared to answer those next week. Page 35. This is one of the largest cost savings on this district, and you, as negotiating with our unions, have been able, this is with our classified unions, you'll note that the amount of individual insurance has grown. Look at that blue number at the bottom. Because what happens now is any new employee coming in as a paraeducator or interventionist, only single insurance is offered to them. And as you can see down at the bottom of the page, that's a yearly savings of over $15,000 per year on that employee. If you look at the graph to the left at the bottom of page 36, you'll see that in 2016, for example, 56% of our interventionists were eligible for full family medical insurance. We're taking full family, and now as attrition goes on and we have new people coming in, only 12% of the interventionists get full family insurance. Also, another thing that you've negotiated on page 37, along with the town, we've gone from a defined benefit program to a defined contribution program. So you see, starting in 2019, the blue, the defined benefit, the number of employees eligible for that is going down, and all new employees coming in the classified area are only eligible for defined contribution plan. Page 38, something that might jump out to you is your legal expenses in 21-22. Went from 45,000, we budgeted 61,000. We're dropping that down to 50,000. Last year, because of the pandemic, any group that was due for negotiations, we pushed off a year. So last year, with our attorney and our negotiation subcommittee, you settled contracts with nurses, custodians, cafeteria workers, paraeducators, and secretaries. It was a very busy spring for the negotiation subcommittee. If you turn to page 39, understand that major repairs are funded by capital, including what we did with the center school library, the center school first floor hallway, and then what we're hoping to do with the memorial lobby. But obviously there is maintenance that needs to be done on each of those areas, each of our schools. If you jump all the way down to page 69, the last time we did an increase to athletic participation was in 2014. And obviously our expenses are a little higher this year. In the year 1920, that spring of 20, we had no spring sports. Obviously the children were not in session. Even last year, COVID shortened all of the seasons. So we did not have as much bus transportation and games, referee expenses, and things like that. This year, next year, we're back to full seasons with athletics. On page 70, an outstanding cafeteria program, and Karen will do some bragging on some of the success they've had, but understand that right now, every child is able to get a free breakfast and a free lunch at every grade level. And then that is completely reimbursed by the federal government. And with that said, that's a tour of Karen's book. And like I said, please go through with a cup of coffee, look at line item by line item. Anything that jumps out at you, Karen would be happy to go through.
So we'll be going through this line by line next meeting?
Any questions you have? Yes, Karen will walk you through this.
Got COVID money. Are they unionized?
The math specialists are part of the teachers bargaining unit. Yes, they are certified positions, so they would be, the union would expect those to be
So when their term expires, they actually leave, or funding for them is eliminated.
When the money for them is eliminated, if this district feels that we can no longer afford math specialists, because they are certified and they are part of the union, they may be able to replace somebody who is retiring and go back to a classroom position, or they would be eligible for bumping other people who have been hired in the last 2 years.
And what if they have those things?
If they were the lowest person on the totem pole,
Nobody retires, nobody gets eliminated, what happens to them?
then they would need to look for employment elsewhere. That's happened in the past. I know there's this perception that once we hire someone, they're in for life. But that just is not the case. And the union does not insist that we keep everybody that comes in. What they insist is if somebody has more seniority and is certified to do a position that is open, we have to consider them first if we're doing a reduction.
Question, you mentioned page 39, repairs to buildings. This is not in the this is our budget, not in the capital budget?
Yes, there's a separate capital lines for major expenditures, including the replacement of an HVAC unit, asbestos abatement, etc.
Right, what I'm looking at on page 39, the box, you have buildings, building by building, Memorial School, Center School, Middle School, High School.
That is budget money in our budget.
This is our budget money.
Correct.
$124,700 in the high school. We have a brand new high school. What are we augmenting in the high school?
I'm sorry, I don't see where what page you are.
Yeah, it says.
Square feet, 124,000.
Yeah, 124,700.
Square feet.
Oh, square feet. Oh, I thought that was. I misread that.
Oh, that's quite all right.
I thought that was capital budget.
Yeah, no, if you look at go over to the left,
Right.
you'll see for building and support, it's closer to 69,000.
Okay, so what would that be?
That is for cleaning, pest control, garbage pickup, supplies, yes. Even a new building, things break. Any other questions? So please, take your time, go through this, please. If you have questions that you think are complex and going to require a little bit of research, just email them to Karen and I in advance, and we'll come in with all the information.
I
Thank
have
you.
a question going back to the budget book, if you don't mind. Sorry to flip-flop, but on page 15, there's staffing on hold, which you had mentioned last time. It's the only piece of the budget that's in yellow, because it is on hold. Can you clarify for us, these are required by the state for us to provide in the case that they are needed, is question number one, correct? And then
Yes.
question number two, in the event that we do need these and they are not included in the existing budget, where does that money come from?
So, staffing for special education is volatile. Things change all the time. We can have a student move in to district tomorrow that we have to pay for, and we would have to find funding for that. So a lot of our bigger expenses, some of the big supplies we buy, toilet paper, et cetera, we buy at the end of the year just to make sure that I have the money to do that. So I know people get concerned when we're spending in June. Those are all items that we held off purchasing just to make sure that should we need an extra interventionist or an extra paraeducator or a one-on-one paraeducator, or we have to fund a child who moves into town with some services provided by another district. All of that we are required to fund. So, I have always budgeted based on what we know is in our school today. I don't put an extra $300,000 in the budget or $200,000 just in case somebody moves in. I don't stick money anywhere else. I've always presented since I arrived and did my first budget in the winter of 2016 saying, this is what we need for our children next year. And I realize that I absorb the responsibility if we need to hire an extra paraeducator, then I've got to find the money out of things that we've planned for to pay for that educator. But I don't wanna, I'm not sitting here saying, yeah, don't worry, we put in for 2 extra paraeducators, we put in for an extra interventionist, and an extra special ed teacher just in case we need them.
If you, Paul, based on what you just said, if something were to come up toward the end of the school year, end of the fiscal year, and you have a budget shortfall, and you said you would reallocate funds, would you come to the Board of Education and ask for our opinion on that, or you just do it?
So usually what happens is Rod will say, Paul, we have it doesn't even have to be somebody that moves in. It's a first grader who we're moving to special ed, and based on their exceptionality, we need a paraeducator. And Rod is pretty conservative, but when he comes in to my room on a Monday morning and brings me coffee, then I know that it's going to cost me in the end. So we make adjustments on the fly. Karen, as part of the budget process, rectifies all the accounts because everything clearly is audited, so I'm not just pulling money from a different client. We'll move things around. We typically haven't shared that with the board. I hate to come to meetings and say, yeah, we're going to move this from here because we need to cover a special education student. I think we try to do that in the most subtle and confidential way that we can. But if there were major cuts that had to be made, then usually we'll sit with the board and you'll get my recommendations of where cuts are, but that's always your purview as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open it up for public comment or questions. We'll start in the room, if you'd like to come to the podium, or one of the podiums. I see none, we'll open it up for Zoom. I do see a hand up. Please state your name and address for the record. It looks like a hand went down. Are you seeing anybody else?
That was I'm sorry, that's the mouse moving around.
Oh, okay.
If anybody on Zoom, sorry about that. I'm going to move the mouse away. Anybody on Zoom, if you go to reactions, you can indicate the hand up.
Okay. Seeing none, we will proceed. Any other questions from the board?
I have a question for Paul.
Okay.
I want to understand the ramifications of a serious budget cut. So I would like to, and this is personal, I'd like to see if you were to, if you could find $500,000 of cuts in the budget increase that you recommended. I would like to, so in a couple of weeks, I'm giving you some little homework to do, but in order to understand the ramifications, if the Board of Finance or if the town decides to vote against the proposed budget, I think the board, not just me, but I think it would be best for the board to know what the ramifications would be of a serious budget cut. So then we would be able to defend your, or tell the public, if you cut, I don't know, 300,000, we could lose, something, bus or something, we'd have to, busing, something like that. I'd like to know where those cuts would be.
Yeah, and I'd be glad to do that. And understand that, in February, there's still a few unknowns, exactly what our insurance is going to be. One of the disadvantages of having to develop a budget in January and you approve it by March 1 is we don't have exact figures on what health insurance will be. We don't know the exact numbers of what retirements may be. And I say that because when a top step teacher retires, we often bring somebody in on a lower step and see a savings there. So I could give you, a couple of possibilities and what that would look like. I hate to say specific programs because I don't want teachers to feel like they need to start putting their resume together and going elsewhere. We're very fond of our teachers, but I could give you some scenarios, yes.
Oh, more than one?
Yes.
Okay, I would appreciate that.
Sure.
Could you have that for us by the next meeting?
I would be glad to. In fact, maybe I should send it to you, and then you decide if you want to discuss it in open session. Not that we wouldn't, not that I'm trying to hide anything, I just don't want to start alarming people if they hear that that program or that position may be cut. There is a time when we have to alert people that they may not have a position, but mid-February is not that time.
Right.
Moving on to item 8, program presentation, there is none. Unfinished business, there is none. Business, there is none. Future business? Okay, hearing none. Personnel actions, Mr. Smith?
None tonight.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open it up once again for audience of citizens. If you'd like to come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Okay, anybody on Zoom? Okay, hearing none. There is a calendar of events attached. Mr. Smith, anything special you'd like to call out in the calendar?
No.
Okay.
Just a reminder to the board members that on the negotiations committee, we have our interventionist negotiations coming up.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I hereby move that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of review and consideration of attorney-client privileged communication relating to a personnel complaint made by a former substitute teacher, and I further move that the board invite attorney Zachary Shuren into the executive session. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you very much. At this time, I'll ask the public to clear the room, please, so the board can move into executive session, and I'll ask the board to move upstairs to conference room 2 for conference 4.
So,